Hello there, I'm Lady Loy. On a Friday, I'm on Lovers Rock Radio, 7 till 9, where I play nostalgic music. And on a Saturday, I'm on Gold Standard Radio, where I play new releases, international music, soca, you name it, I play it, providing it resonates with my ear. Now, I am actually starting a book called Everything You Wanted to Know About Blackness, but were afraid to ask. And of course, it's not going to be everything because everything is too much, but I'm going to do my best. And I decided to write about that moment when we go, oh no, not a black face on the TV. And we kind of equate that with, we don't want that person to have done something bad. Because we know that person on the TV who they're showing is actually a symbol for us all. And we know that when that person has committed a crime, it impacts, very quietly on every single one of us. So I want to share my thoughts on this and what will enter my book as a chapter. Why we hold our breath when we see a black person on the news. There's a particular feeling black people know well. It happens in a split second. You're scrolling, the TV is on in the background. The newsreader pauses and a black face appears on the screen. And before you even hear the words, before the context, before the facts, something tightens in your chest and you think, please don't let it be bad. That reaction didn't come from nowhere. It was trained into us. Because time and time again, when black people appear on the news, it is too often in the context of crime, violence, failure, or controversy. And not just reported, but framed. The images chosen, the language used, the repetition, the placement on the front page of the newspaper. All of it sends a message, whether intentional or not. This matters more when the offender is black. When a black person commits a crime, their face is often everywhere, enlarged, sharpened, sometimes distorted, darker lighting, harsher contrast, an image that makes them look angrier and more threatening than how they look in everyday life. I don't know how many of you saw the image of Axel Rudakabana, who murdered those 5 girls in Southport. Axel actually had short hair, short back and sides, and wore glasses. But somehow he managed to acquire afro. His face was darkened. And it was almost like they couldn't really make his face sinister even if they tried, because it didn't. But I'm not saying that to excuse what he did, but I'm saying that to say how they actually portray black people who have committed crimes. Anyway, I don't want to go off track. And that's a clear example of how imagery is selected in a way that heightens menace, not neutral, not incidental, but chosen, and often deliberately distorted. And what's striking is the inconsistency. When a white person commits a similar crime, sometimes worse, the coverage is different. The photo might be smaller, older, softer. Sometimes there's no photo at all. Sometimes the focus shifts quickly to the background. Mental health, family issues, stress, isolation. There's context. There's complexity. There's humanity. With black suspects, however, humanity is often the first thing that's stripped away. And this is where trust in the media really breaks for many black people, not because we don't understand crime exists in our communities, but because we understand pattern. We notice who is named and who is anonymized, who becomes a symbol and who remains an individual, who is allowed to be complicated and who is flattened into warning. The media rarely says outright, this person represents black people, but it doesn't need to. The repetition does the work. Over time, one black face becomes shorthand for all of us, and we know it. Which is why when we see that face appear, we brace ourselves not just for the story, but for the backlash that follows. Because the consequences don't stay on the screen. We feel it, how we are looked at the next day, in how conversations shift at work, in the comment sections we avoid reading, in the way one individual's actions are quietly used to reinforce old stereotypes about criminality, danger, and moral failure. That is why the coverage hurts, not because it reports crime, but because it reports it unevenly. This also explains why many black people do not trust claims of neutral reporting. Neutrality loses credibility when outcomes are predictable, when black crime dominates front pages but black achievements are buried, when black victims receive less sustained attention than black perpetrators, when the same communities are repeatedly represented or repeatedly presented as problems to be managed rather than people to be understood. And then there's the exhaustion. Because black people are expected to consume this coverage calmly, to accept it just as it's just the news, to not point out bias, because doing so is labelled as defensive or emotional. But noticing patterns is not paranoia. It is media literacy born from lived experience. Over time, many black people stop trusting mainstream news, not because it is always factually wrong, but because it feels structurally unfair, because it does not distribute scrutiny equally, because it amplifies harm in one direction and softens it in another, and because it rarely reflects on its own role in shaping public fear. This is why many black people turn to alternative media, community voices, or individual journalists rather than institutions. Trust moves away from brands and towards people. People who acknowledge bias exists. People who name the imbalance rather than pretending it isn't there. So when you ask why people distrust the news, for black audiences, the answer is simple and heavy at the same time. Because I'm always asking myself why I mistrust the news, and I know it's because of the bias. We've seen what it does to our image. We have seen how quickly one face can become a symbol, how easily nuance disappears, how rarely the same treatment is applied across race. And until the media can look honestly at how it frames blackness, not just what it reports, but how and how often, that instinctive tightening in the chest will remain. That moment of hoping, quietly, that this time the black face on the screen hasn't been made to carry more than one person's wrongdoing. Because we, as black people, we don't want that one person to mar us all, and that's how we feel. Because trust doesn't break in theory, it breaks in repetition, and black people have been watching long enough to recognise it. And so I hope that resonates with those of you who have decided to listen to this video. I really appreciate your comments if it does, and I'll leave it there. You take care now, and look out for my book. I haven't finished it yet, but blackness, all you wanted to know about blackness, but didn't have the courage to ask. I don't know if I'm going to use the word courage, but were afraid to ask. Well, I'll think about it nearer the time. And I've got a couple more chapters to share with you, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.